My husband always said lottery tickets were for fools who couldn't do basic math. But the week he flew to Dallas for a leadership summit, I bought one anyway. 3 mornings later, I discovered I'd won $52 million. Hello, everyone. It's Sarah here, and thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to the channel and leave a like if you enjoy the story. And let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I'm always curious how far these stories travel. Money doesn't change who you are. It just reveals who you've always been. I used to think that was just another empty saying, something people repeated to sound wise. But I've learned it's one of the most honest statements I've ever encountered. My name is Rebecca Morrison. I was 39, and I'd been married to David for 13 years. To anyone watching from the outside, we had everything. A beautiful 4-bedroom home in Oakwood, New Jersey. 2 cars in the garage, his BMW and my 5-year-old Honda that he'd chosen because it was sensible. Our daughter Emily was 10, with her father's green eyes and my stubborn determination. She was the best thing I'd ever done. We had a garden with roses. We spent holidays at his parents' house. I packed his lunches every weekday because Fridays he went out with colleagues. It looked fine. It felt like slowly disappearing. Let me paint you a clearer picture of what our life actually looked like. Our home was beautiful, yes, but it was his taste, his choices. The furniture was all dark wood and leather, the kind of thing David liked because it looked expensive. I would have preferred something warmer, lighter. But I never said that. I learned not to say things like that. The garden with roses? Those were his mother's roses. She'd given us the cuttings herself. I tended them every spring because if they died, it would have been my fault. The holidays at his parents' house. We went every single year without exception. I spent Thanksgiving and Christmas in his childhood home, surrounded by his family's traditions. We never spent a single holiday with my family. I asked once early on. The answer was no. I never asked again. David never hit me. I need to be clear about that because I know what people assume. He never raised his hand. He didn't need to. Control, I learned over 13 years, works best when it seems reasonable. He controlled every dollar. His salary as a district manager. The small income one made doing bookkeeping for local shops. It all went through him. I had a debit card linked to our joint account. Every Sunday night, he'd sit with his laptop reviewing transactions. He'd ask about coffee shops I'd visited, presents I'd bought. Always framed as casual questions. Never feeling casual. I still remember the first time he did it. We'd been married maybe 6 months. I'd bought a sweater at the mall, nothing expensive, maybe $40. That Sunday night, he scrolled through the transactions and said, "Oh, you went shopping? What did you buy?" His voice was pleasant, curious, but something in his eyes told me I was being evaluated. I showed him the sweater. He said it was nice. But he also said, we're trying to save for the house. Maybe we should be more careful. I nodded. I felt like a child who'd been caught stealing cookies. That was the moment I learned to justify every purchase. Every single one. He had rules. Not written anywhere. David was too smart for that. But they existed. No big purchases without discussing. No credit cards in my name. No gym memberships. No spa days. Nothing frivolous. And absolutely no lottery tickets. He'd said it many times. They're attacks on people who don't understand probability. His voice carried that patient, slightly annoyed tone that told me the conversation was already over. I'd stopped arguing years ago. It was easier to nod. But here's what I want you to understand. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. The way I dressed. The friends I kept. The things I said at dinner parties. I became an expert at being the perfect wife. I knew exactly what to say, how to smile, when to stay quiet. I knew David's moods the way sailors know the sea. I could see a storm coming from miles away. And I would adjust. I would make myself smaller. I would disappear into the spaces he left for me. That's what 13 years of marriage to a controlling man does to you. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, like erosion. A little piece of you breaks off and washes away each year. By year 10, I barely recognized myself. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. A woman who smiled on cue. who nodded when she wanted to scream, who had stopped asking for anything at all. But I'd always been drawn to those tickets. Not from greed, or maybe partly from greed. Mostly because they represented possibility.
A door.
A world where the next few minutes could be completely different from everything that came before. When your life feels built around you instead of by you, a $2 ticket feels like breathing. I used to stand in line at the grocery store and look at the lottery display. Just look. I never bought one. I couldn't. What if David found out? But I looked. I imagined. I played a little game in my head where I bought a ticket and won, and everything changed. It was a fantasy, a harmless daydream, but even that felt dangerous. The week David left for his Dallas conference, something in me shifted. I don't know how to explain it. It was like a tiny crack appeared in a wall I'd been building for 13 years. He kissed my forehead at the door, the same kiss he'd been giving me for years. A peck. Nothing more. He reminded me to pay the electric bill. He told me not to forget Emily's dentist appointment. He rolled his suitcase down the walkway and got into his BMW and drove away. I stood in the doorway and watched him go. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. That's the ugly truth. I felt relief when my husband left. I stood there in the silence of the house, and I breathed. For the first time in months, I breathed. That afternoon, I dropped Emily at her friend's house for a sleepover. She was excited. She loved her friend Mia. I watched her run up the driveway, her backpack bouncing, her hair flying behind her. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She knew I'd be there. That's what mothers do. We're always there. I sat in my car for a minute after she went inside. I thought about how free she looked, how free I used to be. Then I drove to the gas station on Ridgewood Road. I stood at the counter for what felt like forever before I said it. "1 Powerball ticket, please." The cashier was a young guy with a nose ring and tired eyes. He didn't look at me. He just slid the ticket across the counter like he'd done it 1,000 times. Which he had. I paid with $2 in cash I'd been saving from my bookkeeping clients a little bit at a time. David didn't know about that cash. It was my secret. My tiny rebellion. I tucked the ticket into my planner, where David never looked, and told myself it was nothing. A joke with myself. I drove home and made dinner and watched TV, and went to bed. I forgot about it for 3 days. Then Thursday morning came. Emily was at school. I was drinking coffee at the kitchen table when I pulled up the Powerball website. I'd seen a notification about the drawing. I checked the numbers once. Then again. Then I set my coffee down carefully because my hands had started shaking so badly. 5 white balls. 3, 12, 21, 35, 47. Powerball. 14. I had them all. $52 million. The first thing I felt was disbelief. I actually laughed. It was a strange sound, half laugh, half gasp. I looked at the screen. I looked at the ticket. I looked at the screen again. My hands were shaking so bad I couldn't hold my coffee. I set it down, and I just stared. $52 million. That number didn't feel real. It felt like a typo, like something from a movie. I thought about all the times I'd stood in line at the grocery store and looked at the lottery display. All the times I'd imagined this exact moment. And here it was. And I had no idea what to do. My husband was in Dallas, having spent 13 years telling me lottery tickets were a waste. He was probably at a conference right now, drinking bad coffee, networking with people he didn't like. He had no idea. I sat at that table until my coffee went cold. The morning light changed from gold to white to gray. I didn't move. I just sat there, with $52 million in my planner, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I thought. Slowly. Carefully. Without interruption. Without someone's voice telling me what was practical. The first feeling wasn't joy.
I want to be honest about that.
It was fear. Pure physical fear. My heart was pounding. My stomach felt like it was full of ice. Because my brain, trained by 13 years with David, immediately went to his question. How did you get that? That's what he would ask. Not, are you okay? Not, what happened? He would ask, how did you get that? Because that's who he was. Everything was about control.
Everything was about ownership.
What would David do if he found out? I picked Emily up from school at 3:15. I made spaghetti for dinner. I helped her with her homework. It was fractions, which she hated. I read her a bedtime story. I kissed her forehead and turned off her lamp. And I did all of it on autopilot. My body was moving, but my brain was somewhere else. I was running through scenarios, calculating risks, trying to predict the future like I'd been trained to do for 13 years. Then I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling. The ticket was in my planner on the kitchen counter. $52 million folded between a grocery list and a dentist reminder. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that number. 52 million. I ran through scenarios. Tell him immediately. Claim the money together. Celebrate. I could picture his face, the shock, then the rearrangement as the information settled. He'd become the manager of it. He already managed everything else. The money would become his project. I'd become even smaller. The second scenario was worse. What if he used it as proof he'd been right to control me? What if he said, "See, this is why we need structure. This is why I handle things." What if the money just became a bigger cage? What if I was still trapped, just in a bigger, more expensive cage? That's when I started to really think. For the first time in 13 years, I started to think about what I wanted. Not what David wanted. Not what was practical. Not what was expected. What I wanted. Then, lying there, something else occurred to me. Something I'd been avoiding for about 2 years. His phone. I'd seen things. Little things. A text message. A name I didn't recognize. I'd told myself it was nothing. I'd become very good at telling myself things meant nothing. But in the middle of that night, in the silence of my bedroom, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. 18 months earlier, I'd seen a text on his screen. He'd left it on the nightstand while he was in the shower. A notification from someone saved as J. 2 words, "Miss you." I'd put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. I hadn't said anything. What was I supposed to say? It was probably nothing. Work-related. A colleague. An old friend. I told myself all the things women tell themselves when they don't want to see the truth. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. That night, I let myself think about it. I thought about all the business trips, all the late nights, all the times he'd been distant, distracted, different. I thought about the way he'd started guarding his phone, the way he'd take it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. I'd noticed. Of course I'd noticed. I just hadn't wanted to see. I got up at 2 in the morning. I opened my laptop. I searched. Lottery winner married New Jersey. What happens to money? Can husband claim winnings?
What I found made me sit very still.
In New Jersey, lottery winnings acquired during marriage are generally considered marital property. David could claim a portion, even though he hadn't known. Even though I'd bought it with cash I'd saved from my bookkeeping work. The law didn't care about any of that. It was marital property. Our property.
His property.
But there were ways to protect it.
Trusts.
Legal structures. If handled correctly before any claim was made. I needed a lawyer. A specialist. I wrote down 3 names from an online forum. A forum for lottery winners. I read through the posts. I learned about anonymous trusts. About LLCs. About the 90-day window winners have to claim their prizes.
I was only 4 days in.
I had time, but I had to act fast. Then I sat in the dark kitchen for a while. The house was completely silent. I could hear the refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, my own breathing. Emily's drawing was on the fridge. A crayon house with a sun and 4 stick figures holding hands. Mommy, Daddy, Emily, and a dog we didn't have. I stared at that drawing for a long time. I thought about what I wanted for her. What kind of life I wanted her to have. What kind of mother I wanted to be. I thought about the example I was setting. Was I showing her that women should be small? That women should disappear? That women should say yes and nod and smile while their husbands took everything? I thought about Sunday nights and laptop reviews and tones of voice. I thought about a text that said, "Miss you." I thought about all the things I'd accepted. All the things I'd tolerated. All the ways I'd made myself smaller. Between 2:30 and 3 a.m., I stopped being afraid. I was going to claim that ticket, but I was going to do it my way. Before David got home, before I said a word to anyone, for the first time in 13 years, I had a plan that was entirely mine. I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I called the first lawyer on my list, a woman named Patricia. I told the receptionist I had a sensitive lottery matter. There was a pause on the line. I could tell she didn't get calls like this every day. She offered me a Friday appointment. I drove to the city with the ticket in an envelope. I sat across from Patricia in her office. She was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and kind eyes. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "First, don't lose that ticket. Second, New Jersey is an equitable distribution state. He can try to claim it, but there are structures we can put in place." She explained options. A trust, an LLC, steps that would take weeks. I had time.
One more thing, she said.
"Are you considering divorce?" I looked out her window at the skyline. "I'm considering information." She nodded like that made perfect sense. "Then let's start the paperwork." I met with Patricia 3 times over the next few weeks. I drove to the city and back. I signed documents. I made phone calls. I became a secret agent in my own life. David was still in Dallas. His conference had been extended. I had time. But every phone call was a risk. Every meeting was a risk. I had to be careful. I had to be smart. I'd never been smart before. I'd been obedient. But I was learning. By the 3rd meeting, the trust was registered. The claim was filed through it. Protected from public record. $52 million. Minus taxes. Approximately $30 million settled into the trust. $30 million in an account I controlled. I sat in Patricia's office and stared at the paperwork. $30 million. That was more money than I'd ever imagined. More money than my parents had ever had. More money than anyone I knew had ever had. And it was mine. I filed for divorce in November. David was served at his office. I know this because Patricia's process server called to confirm. He called immediately. I let it go to voicemail. I picked up Emily from school. I took her for grilled cheese and hot chocolate at her favorite diner. She told me about her project on the planets. She wanted to make Jupiter's rings out of construction paper and glitter. I told her that sounded perfect. I tried to be normal. I tried to be the same mother I'd always been. But I wasn't the same. I was already different. I was already free. David's second call came. Then a third. I answered. "What is this?" His voice was controlled. Working hard not to yell. "The documents are self-explanatory," I said. "We haven't even talked about this." "You can come home," I said. "But don't raise your voice in front of Emily." He stayed at his mother's that night. His mother. Of course he went to his mother. That's what he always did when things got hard. He ran to her. She'd fix everything. She'd make it right.
She always did.
His mother came to see me 2 weeks later. A retired teacher. She walked into my kitchen like she owned the place. She looked around like she was assessing damage from a flood. She sat at my table and folded her hands and asked what I'd done. "I won the lottery," I said. "And I protected it legally." "You hid money from your husband." The trust was established before the divorce filing. "My attorney is confident." She leaned forward. "If you drop this, I won't be dropping it. This money will ruin you," she said. "Maybe," I said. "But it'll be my ruin." She left. I sat in my kitchen and I shook. Not from fear. From relief. From the strange electric feeling of speaking the truth out loud. I called my sister in Pennsylvania. "I need to stay with you for a few days." I packed bags for Emily and me. I drove east. I turned up the radio. Emily fell asleep in the back. I drove and breathed and tried to exist without planning. I mostly succeeded. The hearing was scheduled for January. I wore a blue suit. I sat beside Patricia. David sat across with his attorney. His mother watched from the gallery. His attorney argued the ticket was bought with marital funds. Patricia presented evidence. My personal account. The cash I'd saved. The financial control David had maintained throughout our marriage. Then she introduced the photographs of the text messages. David's attorney hadn't known about them. I saw it on his face. The judge ruled in my favor. The trust was confirmed as my separate property. I received primary custody of Emily. David got parenting time. The house would be sold. Proceeds split. He didn't get the money. He got nothing. The divorce was finalized in March. I signed the papers alone. I walked out of the courthouse. I breathed the cold air. I drove to my new apartment. I sat in my kitchen and made coffee. For the first time in 13 years, I didn't know what would happen next. It was the best feeling. I bought a house that summer. A craftsman bungalow with a porch and a wild garden. There was a tire swing in the backyard. Emily ran straight to it. I put in an offer that day. We have a good life now. Not perfect. Not uncomplicated. But mine. What would you have done? I'm not asking to judge. I'm asking because most of us have a moment when we're handed a chance to choose ourselves. If this story stayed with you, please like this video and subscribe to Zarabell Stories. Thank you for listening.